Yeah, that'd be great. Hi, welcome everybody. Today is our special invitation to Dell EMC. We have Keith Dean. Because of our relationship with Dell EMC, we are one of the only providers of a PowerStore in the state of Texas for a demo. They were kind enough to extend that to Netsync Network Solutions. I am Sean Sellers, the Director of Vendor Management. We are a minority-owned, woman-owned business. We are a hub vendor. We are also one of the largest SLED providers in the state of Texas, but also we are one of the largest commercial providers coming up with a lot of new customers that are interested in Dell EMC. That's why we wanted to have a partnership and a meeting today to discuss our new PowerStore solution. On the phone, we have Keith Dean, who is an area manager. He's been there since 2013. He's going to go over an overview. We also have a lot of new visitors today that joined in at the last minute. We were submitting Grubhub gift cards to everybody. We'll have our team reach out to you if you submitted a registration today. We want to thank everybody for attending. I'm going to go ahead and silence the other phone that's ringing and let Keith take over from here. Keith?
All right. All right, just double checking my mute there. All right, so real quick, just a little bit about me. I'm the area manager for the account system engineers that cover Dallas, Houston, and all of Arkansas. I also cover all the way out to West Texas and Lubbock, and we cover the Beaumont areas as well. A little bit about me, as mentioned, so I've been Dell Technologies since 2013. I've been married since 2006 to my wonderful wife, Anjali. I have 3 kids, Liam, London, and Brooklyn. Brooklyn's the newest addition at 6 months, and actually I have another one on the way. And then we have a bunch of fur kids. We got about 6 dogs that you see there in the pictures, who were our first children, but they are very much an integrated part of the family. Brooklyn is obviously the youngest and the one that rules the roost today at home. Real quick about my journey here. So I started off as a Dell Technologies customer. I became a Dell Technologies resident and implementation person. I then became an engineer pre-sales engineer for Dell Technologies for a number of years, and then worked my way up to being the account system engineer area manager for the engineers in this area that cover commercial. So today we're going to talk a little bit about PowerStore. PowerStore is our newest offering in the mid-range. There's a lot of new features that come along with it, and a lot of innovations that we've packed into it with this development. Real quick, just taking a step back and just looking at the frame of the environment that's out there. If we think about our daily lives in IT, we're always trying to balance. So we have all the responsibilities on the data side. We have responsibilities to operations, infrastructures in the middle. Everybody wants something that's cheaper, better, faster, stronger type of mentality right now. And if we look at from a history perspective, purpose-built storage arrays were originally designed to have data protection. They wanted a little bit of data efficiency, although that wasn't always the biggest driver in the very beginning, especially before things like DDP compression. We needed to be able to have value there. We wanted to be able to have the ability to streamline all of our storage needs into one area, have the fault tolerance, be able to replicate. That was what was important in the beginning. However, as the industry has changed, more things have come up. Number one, most customers don't have, nor do they need, a dedicated storage team or storage engineer doing nothing but storage. We always have a storage guy. I know when I was on the other side, storage was my primary function, but it wasn't all that I did. I had to take care of storage. I had to take care of backups, AD, infrastructure, cabling, networking. We all wear many hats. So the more simple and the more efficient that we can make systems, the better it is for all of us, and the more value that we can deliver to our customers, the business that actually goes out and makes money. In order to really deliver on all these, a new architecture was required. And that new architecture is PowerStore. PowerStore is something that we designed for the data era. We have 3 pillars that PowerStore is all about. It's data-centric, it's intelligent, and it's adaptable. And we're going to go through each one of these. Just as a side note, I did make this presentation a little more high level. There's a couple of times that we're going to dip down a little bit into a little more technical content when it's business relevant, but just judging from the attendees list and who's joining, I want to make sure that this is a session that's good for everybody, and everybody can take something of it. For that, we are doing that. I'm doing that. Also, if you have additional questions, the chat box is there. please use it. I'm going to have a couple of breaks built in where we can answer questions. I don't mind standing up here and just doing the slides that I have. I love answering questions much more than that. So if we dig into the data-centric side of it, a couple of tenets. Number one, we had to be able to support any workloads, whether it be physical, virtual, apps, databases, containers, and files. It needed to be performance optimized, and we wanted to make sure it would scale up and scale out, and that it was all NVMe as well. And we needed to make sure that we could have efficiency without compromise. So this is data reduction without any type of penalties, without any type of worry. If we look at any workload landscape, you have relational databases, you have ERPs, you have electronic medical records like Epic and Meditech, you have your cloud native stuff that you have in either GCP, AWS, Azure, your content repositories, your home directories. All of those come in on different protocols. Some come in Fiber Channel iSCSI, some come in NFS, SMB. NVMe over Fabric is something that's starting to gain a little bit of adoption, although it's probably still a few cycles out for most folks. And more importantly, we wanted to make sure that the box could handle all of these, whether it be apps, databases, vVols, VMs, whether it be containers through the CSI plugins that we have, and whether it be files for your home directories and file needs that you have for your customers. Now, one of the core components that I just touched on is scale up and scale out architecture. It's no secret that if you go back 10 years, maybe even 5 years, probably don't have to go that far back, we were limited primarily on how fast a drive could be. So we would have these arrays and we'd put 200-300 drives in there just to push a couple thousand IOPS. That's no longer the case. The bottleneck has now moved. With NVMe flash drives and even SCM, they can overrun just about any node out there. So we're no longer really drive dependent. It's now a matter of what's in the node, what's in the controllers, how much I/O can the controllers push, how much throughput can it push. And because of that, when we set up an architecture that wants to be flexible, we need to make sure that we can adjust and accommodate any workload. So some workloads, if they're not very high performing, and when I say high performing, I'm talking six-figure IOs, they can scale up into using one appliance that has 2 controllers into about 2.8 petabytes for that particular appliance. However, you can also scale out up to 4 additional clusters for up to about 11 petabytes across the stack. But more importantly, you can do data isolation. So we're going to talk a little bit about the analytics that come with it. One example of how this would work for some customers is, if you have Oracle and the Oracle team wants to have everything on the DBAs or everything for them isolated to one array, or they want to purchase their own array, you can do that. You can have one for VMware. You can have one for, if you have a use case for high capacity and low latency. And then also there's the ability to do SDM. You don't have to mix and match them. You can. One important thing here is it's all asymmetric scale out. So what you start with isn't what you have to expand to. I do want to note that this is probably not what most customers are going to do. We can put a lot of I/O and a lot of performance and a lot of capacity in just the 2U platform that you start off with, but the option is always there. Sometimes it's a performance need that we need to scale out, and quite honestly, sometimes it's a political need. If I think back from my time as a data center engineer, I had particular lines of business that were very important to the customer that they would buy their own hardware. They didn't necessarily always need it, but that line of business was so important to the overall business that they were okay investing in that. So this just shows that you have the option to do that, and you don't have to worry about the management. For me, it was kind of a pain at times because I would have multiple arrays. There was no streamlined management across them. I'd have to balance them. Those days are gone. Now everything's streamlined. You see everything, and I hate saying it, but a single pane of glass. You can actually manage across all of the clusters that way and be able to cut up runs, monitor things, and use the data analytics that's part of the platform, which we're going to touch more on in a few slides. So just to tick the box a little bit on the physicality or the physical nature of PowerStore. A couple of things I did want to call out here. Wanted to show that it is a family of arrays. You have everything from 1,000 all the way up to 9,000. What's unique about PowerStore, and something that we haven't done before, is that the capacity does not scale with each bigger model. You can take the smallest array and put the same amount of capacity in it as the largest array. So it's really just a focus on the performance that we need for the workload that we're solutioning for. That is very different from the era that I grew up in, where, you know, we'd have so many drives that we could put behind a box. If we had to have a little bit more drives, we had to go to a bigger controller, and so on and so forth. That is annoying. It's not a good experience for our customers. It's not something that people want to hear, like, hey, I would need to add a few more drives. I have to go get a bigger array because I've hit some limit that is on this particular one, but it's not on the other ones. That's gone. The capacity is the same across the board. It's just the performance, and through our monitoring tools and through the engineers here at Dell Technologies and in conjunction with partners like Netsync, we make sure to pick the right solutions for you. So at a high level, each controller, when I say controller or appliance, it's 2 nodes. Each node has 2 controllers in it, which you can see a detailed slide of next. You have different drive supports, so 1.92 terabyte drives all the way to 15 terabyte drives. Just a real quick note there. That means within the initial 2U, with the data reduction that we have, we can technically fit up to about 900 terabytes of space in that footprint. Doesn't mean we're always going to do it. That is just what's capable, but it's something that's just food for thought. But we will always make sure to look at the performance of the workload, the performance of what you're trying to do, your business outcomes, to make sure that it's matching. And sometimes you'll put it all in a single appliance. Sometimes you scale it out, whether you need a workload isolation, whether you need additional ports, whatever the case may be. But that's all the things that we go through as part of our engineering process. Last technical slide for this session. This is just the background, or the back view for the PowerStore appliance, where you can see that you have 2 controllers stacked on top of each other. They're fully redundant. They have their own power. They have their own MES cards, which is for the inter-cluster communication. And then you have a number of I/O modules. And then over on the right-hand side, you can see how the memory's laid out, how the cooling's laid out, where the ports plug into, and the battery backups. Now, I did mention it a couple of times about data reduction. One thing to know is we have 4-to-1 data reduction guarantee built in the PowerStore, which means when we go to size, we're going to size for 4-to-1. It is the guarantee that we have behind the product. It's something that we needed to do. It was time, and it's inline. It's intelligent. We can't turn it off. It's part of the way the platform comes to make sure that we can make the most use out of the NVMe drives and even the SCM drives that we can use in it. So to recap this section, it's enterprise storage, or a lot of things that we would normally only get in enterprise storage, in a mid-range package. We have active data paths. We have 6 nines of availability, fast rebuilds. So one point there, we actually do have a rebuild target of 280 minutes for any failed drive, whether it's the smallest drive or the largest drive. That is our target. We can actually go faster than that based upon the throughput of these drives, but we usually throttle it to make sure that we're not hurting I/O that's happening. We don't want to ever affect production workloads. So now we're going to move into the intelligent side of it. So this is when we're going to talk a little bit about the programmable infrastructure that we have with PowerStore. We're going to talk about some of the autonomous nature that we have with it, as well as the proactive health and analytics. So you can't have and say that you have a programmable infrastructure if you're not connecting to some of the biggest tools out there. So I said it at the top, I'm going to say it again now. We have CSI plugin for Kubernetes and containers. We have Ansible plugins. Obviously, we have VMware plugins, and we have a fully extensible REST API. I put a little Google search in the top right-hand corner for those that would be more interested in this. There's about an 805-page developer guide out there on how to use PowerStore from a programmatic perspective. This is not something that you have to do. This is not something that every customer is going to do. But for customers who have more DevOps or using SRE type engineering that want to do infrastructure as code, you have the ability to take that documentation and run the entire business, run the entire array, all based upon scripts, all based upon being programmatically interacting with the environment. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the autonomous nature of the appliance. So we said before we're scale up and scale out. Now I'm going to build this slide out. As you scale out, obviously we're going to put workloads in different places. Now, sometimes we don't want those workloads to move for reasons that, hey, maybe a particular line of business purchased some hardware and they want that hardware dedicated to them. But other times it's a bigger pool of resource, and we want to make sure that we're just providing the best response time and the best performance that we can. Well, PowerStore has the ability to look at all the workloads that are happening on the box, and it's going to make recommendations. It's going to say, hey, something's heating up. You need to move it over to another location. And then, even as you scale out, this doesn't stop. It's always looking at the box. It's always looking to see, hey, can we make the response time better for these workloads? Does it make sense to move, volume A from this cluster over to to one of the other appliances in the cluster? Can we improve the response time there? That's automatic. That is always happening. It is approval-based, so we will make recommendations, and then based upon the business rules, you can either approve or reject that recommendation. And then lastly, Cloud IQ is the, almost call it like the fit tracker for your storage array. It's what all Dell Technologies storage arrays feed up to, is a one-stop shop to seeing the reports for across your arrays. You can see the capacity trending. You can see any alerts. You can see the volumes that are cut up, how much capacity you have left. There's algorithms in there to tell you if everything stays current, how long is it going to be until something fills up. All of that is there. It's all in a single pane of glass. This is really good for like knock centers. If you need to have something up on the board, you can have that there. We have some customers who the CIO has this on their mobile phone so that they can always check all of their arrays, not just with PowerStore, but with the other ones that we have as well. But it's a way to make sure that everybody has the information they need. And if you are in a large environment and you have a number of technologies from us, you don't want to have to look in multiple places to get information. You want one place to go to be able to see everything in your environment, and that's what Cloud IQ provides. So I said at the beginning that I didn't make this deck too technical, and I kept it a little more high level, except where there was cases of business justification and business value. The snapshot technology in PowerStore is one of those cases. So with snapshots, which is built in by storage policies, and we're going to touch on that in the next slides, you can set up a schedule for, say, your production database and say every day at 6 a.m. it's going to take a snap. Now, keep in mind, you can go all the way down to minutes, you can go up to hours, you can do it a couple times a day. Whatever works for your business is what you can adjust the threshold for. The important thing here to know is that you can then take a snapshot, mount it on a thin clone, which is thin, so it's not taking up additional space, and then mount that over to another box. So you can use that to refresh test dev. If you want to refresh test dev every night without much performance impact or much capacity impact, you can do that. If you wanted just to have it over there for data reporting, you can do that as well. The use cases are pretty much endless here of what you can do with this. It's just a matter of making sure that you can align the snapshot schedule to what the business outcomes need to be and the business functionality that you need to deliver on. Additionally, if we have a remote site and we're replicating things over, we're going to replicate those snapshot periods as well. So not only will you be able to find those snapshots at your local site, you'll be able to find those snapshots at your recovery site. An interesting example of this, let's say you have maintenance windows Fridays at 7 p.m. Well, Fridays at 7 p.m., you're going to have your protection policy to set to make sure that you have a snapshot. So if anything happens during that maintenance window, you have an easy ability to go back. If you're doing a database upgrade, if you're doing an application upgrade, whatever the case may be, you have the ability to set your policies to protect you and protect the business and protect the data. Those are just a couple of the high-level use cases. Obviously, we can go in deeper in this, and it's can be pretty much infinite what you want to do with it. All right. A little bit more about the PowerStore protection policy. So it's important to know that this is not a per volume basis. You create a protection policy and you apply that to a number of volumes. So it's not something that you have to recreate and manage. And you can have multiple of them for mission critical workloads and not so mission critical workloads. So that you have that flexibility there, but it's very easy. It's intuitive. Again, you can also do this via the REST APIs that are out there if you want the DBAs or the developers to have abilities to do this. And that also will get, and based upon the RPO, based upon the storage protection policy, if you have a DR site, all that gets replicated over as well. So at a high level, just to recap, so copy data from thin clones on local or even remote. You can also use it to restore. So take a snapshot, do an upgrade. If something happens, you can go back. One thing to note, it is crash consistent. We do have the ability to move up to application consistent, which requires a plugin on the, like let's say for SQL or Oracle, you put in a little agent. That agent communicates with the backend storage array. And when you go to do snapshots, instead of just taking a snapshot and it being crash consistent, that agent sends a quiesce command to the database. It quiesces the database and it takes a snapshot. And we just move the snapshot from being crash consistent to application consistent. I'm going to pause there. Were there any questions in the chat that I need to address?
Nope, it doesn't look like there are any yet.
Okay, sounds good.
And Keith, maybe we can just let everybody know that if they do have any questions, please go ahead and submit them online, or just tap in and send a note, and we'll get you online. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. All right, so now we're going to talk about the adaptability of PowerStore. We talked a little bit about the flexible architecture. We're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about the flexible deployments that you have with PowerStore and flexible consumption models. So one thing to note with PowerStore is it is an all container-based OS. Now, we say that, and it's in all the marketing terms, but I know that the first reaction to that is, hey, why does that matter to me? What makes that better? What makes that good? Well, what makes it valuable to all of us is that when we have an all container-based OS, that means all the different functions that we would normally have to update in one large group sum, with let's say our traditional storage arrays, now we can do specific upgrades and updates for just those particular ones. And if you know anything about containers, we're not necessarily upgrading, we're just deploying a new container and then killing off all the old ones. This is going to allow faster speed to market for additional functionality in the future. It's also going to allow for additional and greater resilience. It's going to allow for more long-term supportability. And it's also what helps us with all the different plugins and programmatical interface that we have exposed out to you guys. So our standard deployment, we have the PowerStore OS. We connect it up to your workloads. This is container-based OS running bare metal on the box. For particular edge use cases, we have the ability to do something what we call apps on, which means we actually deploy the OS on it. We load up ESX hypervisor and we deploy the OS on that. And when we do that, now we can actually run VMs in the box. Now, this is for edge use cases, and we're going to dig into that. This is not usually what we would see for your primary data center. It's made for environments that have a little bit of performance or a little bit of VMs, 2-3 VMs here and there, maybe more than that, but they have a lot of data workloads, whether it be IoT sensors, whether it be point of sale, whether it be just data at the edge that you need to bring back. That allows us to take up about 70% less rack space in a very small footprint. And like I was just saying, the big use case that we see for this is if you have data analytics, you have RFID tags that you need to keep track of, if you have robots or robotics that you need to keep track of. Cameras is another big one. If you got a couple cameras at a remote site, you don't have a lot of infrastructure there, but you need a place to write all the video files to, that you can do here as well. And not only can you write it there, now you can also take advantage of the replication that's built into PowerStore and replicate that back to the core to protect the data. For some use cases, we're going to need to extend this out to the cloud. If you're using something like VMware Cloud Foundations, we can hook up with VMware on AWS, and you can port applications both from on-prem to off-prem. It doesn't have to be the apps on. This can actually work with just the traditional or apps on. If you have needs for a service-based type cloud offering for storage, we have that ability as well. We can put storage arrays next to AWS, Azure, and GCP. That allows you to replicate your data up to those service providers and have that data close by and not pay for the cost per gig that you see from some of the providers, and much higher performance as well. So to recap a little bit, so the adaptable architecture. So we want to consolidate the workloads, whether it's block, file, and vVols, and containers, when we deploy it. We need to make sure it's independently scale up and scale out. That's what we talked about with being able to go large or wide with the with the individual controllers. And then lastly, we want to make sure there's no upgrades to downtime for upgrades. Whether we're upgrading a controller, whether we're upgrading the OS, everything has to be non-disruptive, and it has to fit within the working day. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about anytime upgrades, which is probably one of the more revolutionary sides of PowerStore and the offering that we put together. I know, like again, personal experience, you buy a storage array, you use the storage array for a couple of years, 3 years later, they come out with a new storage array, you have to move everything, rebuy everything, and upgrade to it. Or, and this has happened to me personally, you buy a storage array, you did all the design, you had everything laid out the way you wanted it, you purchase it, you bring it in, it's working beautifully, and you wake up the next day and your company just bought 6 more companies. And now you have to bring in all that data that you didn't plan for. How do we make this experience not painful for you? How do we make this experience where it's a good experience overall, and make sure that you're providing the business value without always having to go back to the well? And that's with anytime upgrade. So with anytime upgrade, you're entitled to a controller upgrade going from either the current model that you have to a higher model, or from the current generation that you have to the next generation. You also have the ability, instead of saying, hey, you know what, instead of going from that lower model to the higher model, why don't we just get another appliance, and then we'll add some capacity to be able to isolate some workloads. Those are all available and built into it when we quote these out. Important notes there. Number one, you get the upgrade within the 3-year period of time. There's no need to buy additional maintenance. So you say you purchase something today, it comes with 3 years of maintenance. Between now and 2023, you take advantage of, hey, you know what, the new generation just came out, we just added new processors, or we just added a new generation, or we need to go up to a bigger model because we have more performance. Put in a support ticket, support takes care of it, they come out, they add it in. No PO takes place, no renewing of maintenance, it's all within the contract. At the end of that 3 years, you buy another 3 years, you get entitled to another upgrade. So if we look at a total cost of ownership over a 6-year period of time, you're going to get 2 upgrades in that period of time. And that's going to allow you to, one, be flexible with the business. So as they, adapt to what they bring to you. So as they come in with new workloads, as they come in with new business opportunities, you can quickly adapt to that. Additionally, you're going to be able to cost plan this as well. You don't have to worry about adding costs for either additional maintenance, for additional capacity, or anything else if you need to get that new controller for performance-based reasons. It's just there, it's yours, you're able to do that upgrade. This also helps with extending the useful life of the architecture. It's no secret with the all-flash arrays that we have out there, most customers are not pushing these arrays to their max, and they're not going to. Some of these arrays can do 200, 300, 400 IOPS depending on the workload. That is a good thing in the sense that, one, we know we're going to push the depreciation cycle out. I'm seeing customers with all flash go 3 years to 5 years, sometimes go beyond. With things like anytime upgrade and the ability to take advantage of just doing a scale out or doing a controller upgrade, that's going to push that even further. And that's by design, to make sure that as you grow, as new features become available, you're able to take advantage of all of that and be able to continue to get meaningful use out of your original purchase, whether it be scale out or just going up to the next generation of hardware. Now, the biggest thing here is, hey, it's really great if we can add another controller, and it's really great to be able to take advantage of it. But if it adds additional workload to your team, then it's kind of useless. With the ability that we have for migrating data and the data analytics I talked about earlier, all that goes away. Once we add in a new controller, once you add in, if you say we scaled out, we can automatically move all of the workloads from the previous controllers all the way over to the new controllers. And it's a couple clicks within the GUI. So another thing that we built in is we got to have seamless migration. Now, not to say that this is usually for, and I would say the best use case is if you don't have access to doing, like, say, a storage vMotion, which is probably the easiest way to do any migration out there. We have built-in utilities to move things from our arrays, whether it be Extreme IO, Unity, SE, or VNX, and even some PowerVault, we can seamlessly move those with native tools over to the PowerStore. Again, it's there. It's another option that we have available to it. Personally, storage vMotion is still really good. I would never say if you could use storage vMotion, use that, just because we know it works. It's easy. The VMware administrators know how to use it. It's not an extra tool that we don't have to know how to use. But we're going to have some workloads out there that may be physical. We're going to have some workloads out there that may not be VMware based, and that's where these utilities really come into play to help make the migration seamless for you. So recap on that. So with the future proof, you get the 4-to-1 data reduction guarantee. We get the anytime upgrades, and there's also the flexible payment solutions, which I'm going to talk about right now. With the flexible payment consumption models, there's 3 ways to consume PowerStore. You can pay as you grow, which is your typical CapEx type expenditures, whether it's, you buy for 3 years, you buy for 5 years, whatever the case may be. But some customers want a little bit more. They want a little bit more utility-based model, but they don't want to pay the full utility-based pricing. That's where something like Flex on Demand comes in. Flex on Demand is a program that we have that is metered, but it's not metered per gig by the day. It's metered per gig over a period of time, and you know your rate cards and everything that is there. It's a way to kind of bridge the gap between the CapEx expenditures, which over time is cheaper for on-prem, versus the as-a-service model that you see from some public service providers, where they can get quite expensive. It's staying somewhere in the middle. It's going to be more cost-effective over a long period of time than even CapEx at some points. But it's a flexible option that you have, to where if you have, let's just say you have 50, 100 terabytes today, you think you're going to have to go to 500, 600 terabytes over the next couple of years. We can set it up so that you get what you need right now, and then over time, it increments up to that 500 Ts, and you're only paying for what you're using at that time. And that can be delivered in OpEx or CapEx type contracts. And then obviously you have the ability to do data center utility for the larger environments that need that direct cost per gig per month. They all operational costs. They want it metered, and they want to go that way. So in conclusion, so PowerStore, again, designed for the data era. It's data centric. Any workloads, whether it be physical, whether it be databases, whether it be containers. It's performance optimized for NVMe and SEM. We can scale up, scale out architecture based upon the business needs. You have 4-to-1 data reduction guarantee, so it's efficiency without compromise. We have the intelligent side of PowerStore as well with the programmable infrastructure. So like I mentioned before, there's that 800-page guide out there. If you have a team of DevOps engineers or SRE engineers or somebody who's really good at scripting, that's a good way to take advantage of it. The autonomous appliance side of it is where we monitor the health of the array, we monitor the health of the clusters, and we make recommendations to move things around. Cloud IQ gives us the proactive health analytics to make sure the array is always running well, to make sure that if anything does come up, it's easily recognizable and it can be remediated. And then lastly, it's adaptable. We got to have a flexible architecture for the business. We need to have flexible deployments. We're not going to deploy the same thing at the edge as we would in the core. And then flexible consumption. Now more than ever, especially in today's world, you got to have the ability to make the best business decisions and invest the dollars where it needs the most, but also be very protective of it. And with the programs that we have out there, you can do that. And that's the end of the prepared content that I had, keeping it at a very high level. Again, I'm going to open it up to questions on chat or raise hands that Sean was saying earlier. We can dig into any one of these pieces in a little more detail if somebody has a question.
Thanks,
yeah,
Steve.
I think we had a question. One of the questions is, at the end of 3 years, is maintenance renewal as expensive as buying a new unit?
Good question. No, the answer is no. It's not. The maintenance renewal after 3 years is not going to be as expensive as buying a new unit. That is, and I'll expand upon that. So that is traditionally, so the world that I grew up in, that was always what was done, where we would have, and as a customer, I went through it as well. I had an array, a couple hundred terabytes. I go to do a renewal, and the renewal's 4 or 5 times the cost as what it was to originally purchase. It wasn't a good experience to me, and it was pretty painful experience because I didn't expect it at the time. That is not something that customers are tolerant of anymore. We want to make sure that it is a good experience. And the expectation is you're not going to pay the same amount for maintenance as you would for a new array.
Okay, anybody else?
No, I think that was all we had so far.
Okay, and I did want to reiterate the fact that we do have a PowerStore up in our Dallas facility. So if anyone does need to see a traditional demo, we can go ahead and do that on site, or we can do it virtually, depending on your situation. So please do reach out to your account managers, schedule some time, and we can show you this live.
Yeah, and Sean, Arpina, I'll get these slides to you that you guys can share out. I'll also grab that link for the developer guide for those who are interested in that piece of it as well.
Thank you so much. So if there's nobody has any more questions, we can go ahead and let you get going to your day. We will be following up with those attendees that did register today that we could not get a code to earlier with our account team. So thank you for attending this great event with Netsync and Dell EMC. We look to do a lot more of these together, and everyone have a safe and great day. Take care.